Good morning, everybody. I want to go through a little short video here this morning of what I use my leftover paints on my palette at the end of a painting or the end of a day. I scrape them all up and I put them into a pile. And some of you maybe have already seen my videos that I've done showing the system that I have created myself, although there are some comparable types of systems on the market you can buy that will just slide right into a tray and wrap it in plastic and put it into the freezer. That extends the life of my squeezed out paints dramatically. So I do it all the time, but I also like to save the mixture, or I call them my palette puddles, for creating neutrals or grays, kind of like the master color that I mix all my other colors with when I start a new painting. And this helps me stay more neutral. I have a tendency to want to jump right into those really brilliant pigments right off the bat. And what that does is that it gives your overall painting that same level of intensity, and you don't have those areas that really pop or vibrate or bring the viewer's focus towards. So by starting with your neutrals or your grays, you kind of leave those really intense passages for very specific places within your painting that you want to draw attention to. So because that's kind of a failure of mine to maintain those neutrals and those grays well throughout, this kind of forces me to start that way and creates that kind of gray palette. So, or that gray, rather that gray underlying part of my painting. The other thing that I like to do is I like to layer it on quite thick, and that also again forces me to use more paint in my painting. So I will actually use a palette knife to spread it on in certain areas where I want it. My dog always sneezes during these videos, every single time. So I layer it on with a palette knife pretty thick, and then I manipulate it with my brush and fine-tune it, blend in other colors with it right there on my canvas or my substrate. So I'm going to be demoing how I do that, but I wanted to kind of give a sort of a beginning talk about it, an explanation before I jumped into the demo. So that's what I will be starting on. I'm going to show you the puddle that I have to start with, and my reference photo that I'm going to be working from, as well as, and why I have chosen that reference photo, as well as the actual technique of the processes of the painting. So stick with me and I will see you in a few minutes. Okay, so as promised, here is my palette puddle. And I don't overly mix it because I actually want it to kind of stay somewhat separated. If you mix your palette colors together too thoroughly, you will actually get kind of a muddy, dull gray, because there are just so many colors that are going in there together, colors and temperatures of colors as well. So by keeping it separated like this, it does not get overly muddy. It still has some really beautiful colors in there, but there is enough to it to create your neutrals or your grays, and then I can just tweak it whatever direction I want to go. This is my palette system, my tray, that I put right into a box, into a plastic wrap, and put in the freezer, and that keeps it for quite a long time. These paints that are open will stay usable for at least 2 or 3 weeks, so much better than just leaving them sitting out, where, you know, oftentimes by 24 hours or 48 at most, they'll be becoming unusable. So, and this is the photo reference I want to work from. Oh, I got a light glaring right on it. Let me move that out for you a little bit. I really am just attracted to this photo because of those trees. And so that is going to be my primary focus, is that cluster of trees. And I'll probably crop off even the water. I'll kind of decide that as I go along. But mostly I'm just interested in those trees, and I want to create an interesting painting with a very simple subject without a lot happening or going on in the painting. So it's going to be a challenge with all of those greens. I want to neutralize those greens down to just give a suggestion of the greens without becoming overly intense and having everything just read so green. So that's where I'm at. This is the palette knife that I start with. It's a fairly large knife, and I will be literally taking large sort of puddles from this, scoops of this puddle rather, and applying it right directly onto my canvas. This is the canvas that I'm going to be working from. It is a little square, 8 by 8 inches. I like to do these little studies a lot, having a lot of fun with them. This is a handmade panel. It is a Centurion Oil Prime Deluxe canvas, linen, that has been glued to a piece of gator board, and the gator board is very stable, solid board for mounting to like this. And I can make several of these panels up and have them all ready to work with. I think my color palette, and again I haven't totally made a decision here, but I am thinking that I am going to work with perhaps a blue-green color option. So kind of spreading it within these ranges here. We'll see exactly how that unfolds, but I'm kind of thinking that I'd like to give that a try. I quite often work with a split complement or complement, so it's going to be different for me if I go with this. I think this would be considered a tetrad maybe, but anyway, excuse me, the colors all right within the same color range on the color wheel. So it's kind of unusual for me to work with that kind of a color palette, so we'll see how that all goes too. And I am an intuitive painter, so I may very well kind of switch midstream. I like to let the painting kind of have a voice of its own, and sometimes it decides it wants to go in a different direction than I wanted to take it. So we'll see what happens. Okay, hold on. Okay, I'm ready to start here. I'm going to first lay in quick little drawing to get some positioning of what I want to happen here. You can do this also by doing some thumbnails. I'm an impatient painter, not necessarily something that I advocate for people, but it works for me. And I feel like you just have to do what works for you. That's important as an artist. No two people are the same. We don't have the same personalities. We don't have the same voice to be heard. They're all different. And I think that's really important, that we as artists use our own voice. That's what makes our work set apart from anybody else's. Okay, I'm kind of getting an idea of how I want to lay it out. Now, I don't follow my photo reference, nor if I'm working from life, which I often do, either plein air or still life set up in the studio. I do not. I'm not a slave. Now, a little bit more so in a still life set up in the studio because I've got so much control over how I set it up. But outdoors, plein air, just as with a photo reference, Mother Nature rarely gives you that perfect arrangement. So I use it as a reference point only, and then make my own determinations on what's going to work. Okay, now here's where I take my rather large palette knife. Got some leftover paint. I guess I didn't wipe it off very good, but that's an easy solution. I just take a straight edge razor blade, pull it down across it, cleans it right back off. Just like that, we got it nice and clean again. Okay. I'm thinking I'm going to lay in this area here first. I want this to kind of fall back into the background. So I'm going to make it more bluish. I see that there's a little bit of my puddle that has a little bit more blue in it than the rest of it. So I'm going to pull from that part of the puddle. That's going to be too dark. So I'm going to add some of my titanium white in there to lighten it up. It's a little too gray, so I add a little bit more of my ultramarine blue to both intensify it a little, but to cool it off also. This looks like a fairly good color to me, very good value. So I'm just gonna sort of slather some of that right in there. Not too thick. I don't want it to become so overwhelming that I can't move it around and add other color to it as I go along. Need a little bit more here, but enough so that I'm getting a substantial amount of my palette to get started with and to not be skimping on my paint. And I especially recommend giving this a try. Whether you stick with this as a regular part of your painting routine or not is, up to you, but give it a try for those of you that struggle with painting thick and getting enough paint on your canvas. You don't want to waste it. Well, this serves two purposes. I've got this palette puddle that's leftover paint that would otherwise just go to waste, and so I resolve that issue, but also by putting it on with a palette knife like this, I'm not allowed to be quite so frugal with what I'm putting on there. So down there, fairly goodly amount, and just get started to kind of layer in some of that general value and local color. All of this can be modified as we go along. So this is just kind of giving you your underpainting, your value structure, a little bit of your roadmap of where your painting's going. Now my next large areas are these tree masses here. So I'm going to get a bit of that palette color in there for that. And I'm kind of seeing this sort of, I mean, I want it to be this sort of muted green, and there actually happens to be some of that in my puddle. So I'm going to pull from that and lay some of that in there. Just kind of scraping it right on there. Capturing a sense of where some of the masses are, but not too worried about that yet at this point. All of that will be adjusted and moved around, but the more that I kind of get it started in the right direction, the less I have to alter it as I move forward in my painting. You can also use the back side of your knife for smoothing some of that on. I just think these colors are so pretty. It's even already. Okay, I want some of that front shrubbery there, and that is going to be from my puddle pile, also in that green area, but there's a little bit of my puddle that's a little bit more almost kind of a yellow ochre color, and I am trying to keep my greens really muted as well as creating a variety of greens. So this will work really well to lay in those foreground bushes. The warmer color goes forward, the cooler colors go back, so I'm already kind of establishing that. As I said earlier, I really don't want the water on there. I don't think I'm okay with doing it without the water. My focus is this beautiful structure of the trees in here, so that's where I'm going to start filling in, and they feel just so stately, and they got such interesting shapes to them. And so that's what I'm going to be emphasizing in this, and so I'm really kind of cutting that whole bottom area off. Now I've got this mass shape in here, which, you know, the sunlight hits your flat planes a lot stronger than it does your vertical planes. So it's going to be lighter and probably warmer and more intense than the trees. So finding a little color in here. Got some nice interesting shades to it. And actually, I think I'll start out with sort of the further away part of that ground area, which I am going to very deliberately push the cools on to move that further back. So it needs to be cooler and lighter and less intense than the foreground. Again, I don't have to get this exactly where I think it's going to go. I can make adjustments to it as I go along. But this helps to establish that far away ground. And again, getting some fairly thick color in there so I'm not tempted to start scrimping on my paint. I get some of that in there. Now that's that flat plane further away. Now I'm going to address bringing that flat plane where it is up closer, and that is quite warm according to the photo reference, but again, what's important to me is how it looks in my painting. So, well, I'm going to start with the reference that I'm seeing from the photo. I'm not going to be a slave to it. And again, this can all be adjusted as I go along. So if I decide that's too light, too dark, too bright, all of that can be shifted around. But right now I'm just trying to get some of that thick color in there, so I'm forced to work with some beautiful colors. Isn't that pretty already? Those pretty colors. Not too much paint on there, but more than I'll bet most of you ever work with on your paintings, unless you're palette knife painters. And you can do this same technique and stick with your palette knife all the way through your painting if you want, but I like the control and different types of strokes I can get with the brush. So I usually just start with this as kind of an underpainting and then switch over to working with my brush. Now the only mass area that I have not filled in yet is my sky, and I want to create this sort of harmony in the painting. So again, I'm going to kind of push what the photo reference has told me. The sky is probably one area, unless I am representing a really cloudy day or hazy day, a lot of atmosphere. I probably won't mix my puddle gray into my sky when I start filling it in, because my sky I want to keep pretty clean. So I have not mixed any of my puddle gray into this. We'll see how that goes, because I will probably pick some of that up as I go along spreading it out. What I have here is a mixture of Radiant Blue by Gamblin, which is not a color I've had on my palette for very long, but started using it about a year or two ago and really like them because they don't require me to do a lot of mixing to get this nice, beautiful, clean color. So that's what this is anyway, combined with Brilliant Yellow Light by, let me think a minute, Jack Richardson Shiva paints. I am going to exaggerate towards the horizon. Your sky tends to be warmer, and you'll get more dimension in your painting if you push that. You're looking through a lot more atmosphere at the horizon line than as you go up into the sky. So I'm making this, exaggerating that sort of warmer bluish greenish color that you will see along the horizon line. Again, I can, move that up onto a less greenish color as I go along if I want to. Now I'm going to take a little cobalt blue and some titanium white and mix together a cooler blue for the higher part of the sky. Remember that your skies usually with some definite some definite what's the word I'm looking for, situations where exceptions there we go, sorry with some definite exceptions, but overall your sky is usually the lightest value in most of your landscape paintings, because after all that is where your light source is coming from. Some exceptions to that are going to be a snow-covered landscape in which the light is actually reflecting onto the ground, and the ground, the flat plains, particularly the ground, are probably going to be lighter than your sky, especially on an overcast day. So that water sometimes also, there are some different situations, but the most common thing is that your sky is going to be your lightest value in landscape painting. So there we've got it. I have laid out all of my dominant colors. I have my blocked in my masked shapes. I squint down and I've got a good beginning for my value structure in my painting. And I've got lots of paint that I can manipulate and work with. I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a sort of a close-up there to get a good idea of just how much paint I have on the canvas panel there, the linen. It's quite a bit, but it's not tons, because like I said, you don't want it to become such a muddy mess that you can't deal with it. And I can always take more paint off if I decide that I've got an area too thick and it's just getting difficult. It's you know, I can always drag through it and pull some of it off so I don't have so much massed into a particular area or one of my shapes. So there we go. This is the point to where I would pick up a brush. My favorite brush is the Brights. A Silver Bristlon Bright are my favorite brushes. They're not a real expensive brush, but they seem to hold up really well. And I just love the shape that they come in. They hold a lot of paint. They push paint around. I can use like almost that sort of chisel edge to get a real sharp line, or I can use the flat of the brush to get a nice broad stroke. So I use these brushes a lot, maybe almost exclusively. Okay, so now I'm going to start pushing some of this paint around so I can do a little bit of blending, a little manipulating, a little fine-tuning of these colors and these shapes. I'm going to start out with a little bit of mineral spirits just really in the bristle itself. I don't really want a lot of mineral spirits getting into my paint, but I don't want to start with it totally dry either. So I'm just kind of almost cleaning it off more than anything else. Okay, I'm going to start here with the sky area and sort of blend some of this together. See how we can do that, because there's already so much paint on the canvas that everything can just be pushed around right there on the canvas. We don't need to be picking up a whole lot more paint. Now obviously if you're working on a larger painting, you're going to not be able to dive in quite so quickly, and you're going to have to work almost more in perhaps time frames of sections. But on a smaller painting like this, and maybe you should start on a smaller painting just to kind of try the process out rather than diving into a big painting before you try it. Trying to keep things pretty clean in the sky area again, although some of these other areas I will very deliberately start to use mix right on the canvas itself. So creating a sense of the depth in the painting by making some sky holes. These are not just random little dots of paint. They are thought out to create a very believable sense of sky holes in the trees, but also to create a nice balance of shapes and so on in your painting. And again, these are things that can all be tweaked. Let's just start getting some of that in there to get a feeling of things. Okay, I want to start building up a little bit of that volume in that tree and kind of fine toning. Kind of like the idea, because I'm keeping this so neutral, I'm going to go pretty gray with some of that. Can add more intensity as I go along. I like to create sort of a pattern in my strokes, but that is an individual choice I make, sort of part of my style. You can decide, what works best for you. Sort of creating a dark here, because I want to put in some of the tree trunks, and although they are light, I want to start out with some darkness behind them so that I can create some three-dimension. With this, might have got a little too much blue, although I can work with that. This, I have just taken a combination of ultramarine blue, transparent red oxide, mixed that together, which does make pretty much a black. Added some white to it, brought it up to kind of a light gray brown, and then cooled it off with a little bit more of the ultramarine blue. And now I'm going to take that, because of that chiseled edge that I was talking about on my brush, I'm actually going to put in some of my tree trunks using just that chiseled edge. Making interesting shapes, following my photo reference to some degree, because that was what attracted me to this photo reference. So it's got some pretty good shapes and interesting tree shapes in it, but again, I don't want to follow it so strictly that I lose the balance and composition in my painting. So I will do whatever is necessary for my painting as far as making adjustments and readjustments. I've actually sort of reversed my shapes here. Not entirely, but these ones here are almost more, what I've put over here is almost, I'm looking more at what I've got happening over there as a reference. So, in case you wonder where on earth I came up with this stuff I'm filling in here. It's on my photo, it's just not in the same place. Now, my goal at this point is to really get rid of all of the white areas, and then I can start assessing how things are working within my painting itself. I want to fill in these with sort of the sky holes so that I can get those white pockets, which may be kind of distracting me. Get at least some of that out of the way. I have to be careful here that I'm not picking up a lot of color from everything that's laid on there, because I don't want to muddy up my sky. At this point, a lot of wiping down where necessary and picking up some more clean paint. In some cases, it's going to be okay if I pick up a little bit of the green off from that tree, because that's going to kind of filter those sky holes so that they aren't too intense. But at least that gives me a start. And again, I'm going to get rid of some of this white. So it helps to kind of blend it, so we don't have everything at an equal thickness and a lot of hard lines where we want soft lines. At this point, I almost feel like I dance with the brush. It kind of bounces around and creates beautiful sort of dancing shapes. And with trees, I like to kind of create sort of some random flicks. It gives more a sense of the leaves on a tree being sort of light and airy, not too dense or solid. I can always add more sky holes if I decide that I've kind of gotten too dense with my leaves, or the other way around. Sometimes I will wait a day or two and come back in and tweak some of these sky holes when my underpaint is dry. Otherwise, I also can use my brush or my palette knife, or just a second here, I have one of those handy. I have those, I can't think what they're called right now, and I can't find one, but they actually remove, pull the paint out. Oh, I know where they are, they're down here. Oh, there it is. I did a video in which I showed what I do with these color shifters, that's what they're called, and these will actually take color right out very effectively. So if I get too much color and I want to remove a spot, this will pull it right back out. So especially when you're working heavy like this, these tools can come in really handy. So you can reduce some of your paint and rework areas that maybe are getting a little too thick or too dense and you're having a hard time pushing the paint around in them. So that's what those are. I don't mind at all if some of my blue from my underpainting continues to show through. I think that that actually is a very interesting element to my paintings. Sometimes I pretty much eliminate it by the time I'm done, and sometimes I allow quite large sections of it to still show through when I'm done. So that again is one of those decisions I make as I go along and sort of decide what seems to be working for my painting. I try to paint quite intuitively at this point. So if it feels like everything is sort of random, in a way it is, but it's random from the sense of a lot of experience with painting, to where I know what's gonna, well, mostly I know what's gonna work and what isn't. I know what I want to try and what I don't, and so it's all based on experience. I actually kind of like where I scraped that off, that there's a little bit more maybe of the sky showing through in a couple of areas. I think I'll hold on to that. Give some nice interesting shapes to those trees too that way. So far I have stuck right within that sort of blue-green range that I had said earlier. I thought I might try to work on this painting. I really haven't deviated from it very much. We'll see, you know, how much that changes as I go along, if I feel it's necessary to introduce some other shades. But for right now, I'm okay with that. This is the point to where now I start working with cleaner color. I have layered in all of that nice thick gray tone, and now I can start deciding, okay, where do I want more intense passages? Where does it need to be less gray? And so I start working pretty much with my mixtures. I do mixing, but a lot of it is pretty straight from the tube. Now, like this again is one of the Gamblin Radiant colors. This is Radiant Turquoise, I believe. And I just have it mixed with some titanium white, and it's adding some nice sparks of color. Now I am working with my painting laying horizontal, which I don't mind doing that too much with a small piece like this. but I am doing it mostly so that I can give you a better video of my palette and my painting and my photo all at the same time. So normally I would work from an easel, even on a small painting, so that I can get a better view of just what's happening, better perspective and so on what I'm doing. I want to actually create still yet a third level of dimension in this painting. So these trees here are going to be closer to us than these trees, which means I need to make these a little cooler and a little lighter, because we are looking at it through more atmosphere as it gets pushed back. So I've got, that nice paint already started in there, but I'm going to add some lighter shades with that, and I'm going to kind of stick with a blue purpley shade with a bit more of the titanium white in it. Let's see how that is. It's not a bad color, but it's still too dark. A little bit more titanium white. Gotta be careful here, don't get too much titanium white. Like that, I did. Yeah, that'll work, because I'm also mixing it with what was already down there. One thing about painting in your background especially is that your tree masses, your shapes on the bottom, are going to be darker than what is on the top, because the foliage on the top is shadowing that area on the bottom. Just going to get some of this blocked in and then make adjustments. Easier for me then to see what shapes I like and what I don't, and what I want to change. But making sure I get some of this behind my foreground trees. That again helps to create some depth in there, because it shows that there's things going on behind these trees in front, and that is just again going to be more descriptive of the dimension and distance in my trees. Okay, it's kind of nice. I want to keep this a little darker, and so I'm going to go back to my little bit more bluish color mixture that does have some of my palette gray mixed in with it. And get some of this darker in there. And with kind of a goal of getting rid of some of that white. It's going to be easiest for me to tell where my adjustments need to come in once I have gotten rid of all of the white, because now I'm going to have a much more accurate view of just how my composition is reading. Some softening of the hard lines. I don't want my lines on my background to be real hard, because they're moving back. Now there are different ways of creating a soft or lost edge. One is by blending, another is by sort of striking through color into the surrounding area, so that when you step back, your eye visually blends those. And some of it is just going to be using really similar values and or colors is as you transition from one section to another. So again, your eye blends that as you step back. So there's different ways of creating those soft edges, and especially if you want to be working with really thick passages of paint, you may not want to thin it way down or over blend it. You may like the stronger thicker passages of paint, but then you still have to create a certain depth and dimension by having some of those little bit more lost edges. Now, like up in these trees here, the best way that I am going to be able to accomplish that is by taking some of my radiant blue, some of my titanium white, and actually cutting across some of that color on the top there so that I am blending in those shapes. I'm using a really delicate touch when I am doing this because I don't want to remove all of my paint over top. I will squint down quite often also because that helps me better see the shapes that I'm creating without getting too caught up in the objects themselves. I'm painting shapes rather than painting all of the little trees, and so by squinting down I kind of lose that sense of, oh, this is a tree a bit. I don't want to overdo the eye holes, both because they will then become unrealistic looking, but also because then they would be distracting. But again, this is a point to where I am making design decisions and I can change those as I go along. So just trying to soften those background trees so that they sit to the back while my trees here in front come forward. Let's do a little bit more to the foreground here, mixing in really just some of that. It's one of my favorite tube colors, and I'm forgetting what it's called. Let me look here quick a minute for you. It is Shiva Yellow Citron, and it is a Richardson oil color also, but I just really love that spring green. It's about as intense of a green as you can possibly get. And the nice thing about going with a really intense tube color is that you can always tone it down, but it's really almost impossible to get a more intense color out of a tube color that starts out muted or grayed down. So I have this on my palette pretty much always. It's a standard color for me, even when painting my still life setups. It's good in the foliage of the still life, so and I can always, mix it with a lot of other things to create some beautiful colors. I also do work with a medium. I don't use this a lot, but if my paint feels like it's getting a little too dry, I have a little too much drag in it, then I can add some of my medium in with it. And that is Gamblin solvent-free gel. Comes in a tube. It holds the brush strokes and just makes the paint a little slipperier, smoother to work with. So again, now here I am actually creating sky holes in my shrub here in the foreground, although it's not the sky that's showing, it's my foreground area that is showing through, but it's still creating those holes or pockets in there. And again, so important for creating depth and dimension in your painting, because it shows you that there's light filtering through. It shows you there is something happening behind these mass shapes in front. So you have to be judicious on how you use them, but used properly, they are very important and very effective in your final painting. I like to actually be thinking while I'm doing this of what these bushes would look like if I was standing in front of them. I'm not just randomly poking little dots and spots in there. I'm actually thinking, okay, you know, if the light shone through here, that might actually create sort of a sense of the branches that are down underneath that shape, and help to design the branches a little bit, define it. Softening some of those hard edges just by really pushing the paint around a little bit, almost like I'm very delicately scribbling, so that I am creating some soft edges, but still not taking off a ton of my very thick paint that I want left on there. So it's coming along, really pulling together. At this point, I would definitely have stepped back and taken a look at it from a distance several times, but since I'm trying to, you know, shoot this and keep it moving forward, but I'm just telling you that so that you will take that into consideration as you are working on your painting. It's very important to be stepping back and evaluating, because it can look so different, and especially when you are working in sort of blocks of broken color, your eye or brain blends these colors as you step back, and up close they can appear to be just really sort of almost random dots of color all over the place, and it can be hard to judge whether or not you are holding on to your value shape. So important to be able to step back if you need to, and to look at it from a vertical position, because that's, after all, what you're going to have happening when it is completed and hanging on a wall or sitting on a shelf. It's not going to be viewed from a horizontal position. Now I'm getting a lot of my masked shapes pretty close to completed here. There is a lot still that needs to be done with this painting, but I've got a good majority of the white gone. I've got my large shapes blocked in. I've got some visual blending of my different levels of atmosphere and my perspective. So moving very well into where I want to be on the painting, but certainly a long ways from finished. But this is a good evaluation point, because now I've got enough done to where I can really see what I need to do next. Work on some of those tree trunks. After all, this is what my painting is all about. I'm going to switch over and try out this rosemary brush. It is a angle brush, which I like also because that will also give me a variety of different strokes, shapes of strokes and so on, a little different control. So I'm going to try this with some of those tree trunks. I don't want them to get too uniform, but because my painting is all about my trees, I definitely want to get some real interest into those tree trunks. This is kind of a mixture How that creates, with a little bit different handling of the stroke, how that creates just a really fine line even when I want to, so I can create these different shapes. And I get a little bit more of that purple, which is a dioxin purple. I usually have that on my palette. That's very typical for me. And I'm going to put a little dab of my gel in there because I want it to move pretty smoothly for me here. I don't want to have don't want it to fight me. I need to kind of move it along without messing up what's underneath. Some things to consider while you're putting your branches in is that your tree branches will tend to look lighter when they're against the dark parts of your painting, your background, not just your painting, but in real life. And they will tend to look lighter where they are, wait a minute, that's what I said. They'll tend to look darker where they are going over top of a light area. So, again, you can push those things that you know to be true. I got a feeling my head's maybe getting in the way here some of the time, because at this point I'm kind of getting a little bit more detailed with what I'm doing. I don't want everything in my trees to be the same color, but I also want to push some of that value a bit. And here is where I oftentimes will leave a painting until the next day when it's had a chance to set up a little bit. I am still applying my paint pretty thickly, even at this point, but not so thick that I can't manipulate it. Getting some interesting things happening here with the branches, because again, that's what my painting is all about, is those beautiful trees. And kind of looks like I got a lot of detail happening, but it's really just pushing it sort of delicately, but allowing it to kind of have almost an organic movement about it, so I don't get too rigid. I want to be careful. See, what I have done here without meaning to is I've got these two branches almost identical there, and that is definitely going to have to change. And I can do that simply by adding some more of my sky holes right there if I want to. Try that. That takes care of it. Make a decision. Which one of them do I want to get rid of? I don't like what's happening here, so I think I'll get rid of that one. I can tell right now that I am going to want to let this painting sit up before trying to clean up some of the sky, because I am having trouble getting clean sky in there because of pulling up on the wet paint that's underneath, and that's okay. That is perfectly okay. I don't want as much detail in my background as I've got in my foreground, because that's one of the things that happens as things move away. You also lose the detail. And I don't want my background to overtake my foreground with too much emphasis on the detail of what's happening back there. So I've got to make decisions that will help me tone that down. But I also want, I think, a little bit of green to be popping into that middle ground area. So I'm pulling up on that green that I like so much, but I'm going to tone it down with a little bit of my puddle gray until I get a color that I think is going to work with what's already on there. I don't want it to be too intense, and I think maybe this is too intense. But it will mix with what's already on there, so maybe it'll work. Okay, I am going to continue to just sort of break down those passages and those shapes, and really nothing different than what I have been doing, but I'm going to leave it now and come back, kind of give you a better idea of what it looks like as sort of a finish, rather than having you follow through all the way step by step. I will be adding some further, I should say, branches into my shrub here in the front, and building up a little bit more volume to these shapes of these trees by adding a little bit more of areas where maybe the light is hitting portions of those leaves. You can see that in my photo reference, that there are areas that are lighter, but again, be careful about, following your photo reference too closely. The dark areas, for example, in this photo reference are just black, and they are not in reality. If you were standing there, you would see color and shape and so on in there, but the photos tend to not register that. So you've got to work to some degree with what you know, rather than what your photo is telling you. And certainly, ultimately, your goal has to be to create the painting that is balanced and pleasing, and says what you want it to say, and that will probably require you to make some decisions and changes as you go along throughout the painting. But there's where we're at now, and I'll show you where it goes later on. Okay, thanks everybody. Okay, this is maybe about another hour's worth of work on it. Just the tweaking, the building up, adding some beautiful dashes of color, making some more detail in the trees and even the trees in the background here. I did use my color shifter subtractor tool to get some of those branches and so on in there, which worked really nicely. Just added some dashes of nice strong color because I love color. And that's just, you know, doing that kind of broken color where you lay colors next to one another, but when you step back, visually your eye blends it all together. The last touches that I do are generally those really most pure intense colors, like where I've laid in some dashes of really intense, that's just ultramarine blue with white, and I try to keep it as intense as I can because I just love those shocks of intense color. Same with the dioxazine purple there in some of those areas where I just really leave it very intense. I like to create a more intensity in a focal point so that it brings you into the painting. In this case, you will notice that these areas right in here are strongest in their intensity and their color. You step back, it's a subtle difference, but it brings your eye right into that point and just kind of takes you right back behind those trees and gives you that sort of journey into the painting. This color here, this sort of magenta, is just enough of a contrast from the other cooler purples that it really pops up. This turquoise, again, just enough, you know, to where it's stronger. And even in this sky here, I just kind of put a little bit of brighter lightness right in this kind of area. Again, just, you know, try to keep it subtle while still making a difference in bringing your eye into the painting. So there you go.